In economics, scholars generally worry about achieving Pareto optimality. That just means that the system produces efficient outcomes, where there's no rearrangement of resources that would make everyone better off. But political economy and PPE are concerned with a larger question: which Pareto optimum is best? In English, that means if we're considering a new policy that harms some people and benefits others, how do we decide what to do? Imagine we're going to build a new airport. There are two possible sites, A and B, and 5 people, 1 through 5. Here's what the folks think. Person 1 has a slight preference for site A. Person 2 has a stronger preference for site B. Person 3 is almost indifferent, but prefers site A. 4 likes site A better by $15. This decision is really important for person 5, though. She prefers site B by $35. How should we decide where to build the airport? We could use majority rule. 3 people all vote for site A, and only 2 people vote for site B. Is site A better for the society? The problem is that majority rule misses the intensity of preferences and only records the binary comparison of A versus B. Yet the minority that prefers B prefers it by a lot. They may have a home or business that will be affected or some other reason to care very strongly, whereas the majority who prefer A have a much weaker preference. This is the classical argument for interest group pluralism. The classical interest group theorists, such as Arthur Bentley, would say that in this example, the site B group would actually be the stronger political force. Bentley said political force should be thought of as mass multiplied by acceleration, just like in physics. Mass, in this case, is the size of the group, and acceleration is the intensity of preference. So while Group B is smaller, the intensity of their preferences makes them the stronger group politically. Unfortunately, Bentley was too optimistic. For large numbers of people, it turns out there's no necessary relationship between the benefits to collective action and the ability of the group to organize. In fact, with big democracies, the assumption of the pluralists that the size and motivation of groups reflected their force in politics is almost backwards. The problems with the pluralist claim were pointed out decisively by Mansur Olson in his 1965 book, The Logic of Collective Action. Olson noticed that many latent or potentially beneficial groups fail to organize, and unorganized groups exert no political force, even if their side has the better argument or the more powerful claim. Olson demonstrated that the interest groups that are most likely to form are relatively small, expect concentrated benefits that go only to their group, and are able to provide other benefits or selective incentives to those who participate in the group. Once you understand Olson's point, you're able to understand a lot of puzzles about why organized interests are able to win in democracies even when a majority disagrees. One striking example in the U.S. is the subsidies that go to agriculture, partly in the form of direct payments and partly in the form of deeply discounted insurance. It's been estimated that the total cost of agricultural subsidies in the U.S. exceeds $20 billion per year, with many instances of individual farmers receiving $1 million or more from taxpayers. There are very few voters who are actually farmers, compared to the number of Americans who would prefer lower prices for food. The total costs of these regulations are far larger than the benefits received by farmers. But the small, concentrated interests still win. Olson called this the domination of the large by the small, meaning it's easier for small groups with a big stake in the outcome to organize and act together politically. The large group may pay total costs far larger than the benefits to the small, organized group. But each member of the large group pays a small amount. It's not worth it for any of them to protest or make trouble. In fact, members of the large group paying the costs may not even be aware of the costs. But you can bet that all the members of the small group know exactly what's going on and how important the group is. The most famous example is the very narrowly targeted subsidy for sugar producers. There are fewer than 50 sugar farms of significant scale in the United States, but they receive subsidies of more than $300 million per year. And that's not the only cost imposed on taxpayers. It's been estimated that the increased price of sugar in the U.S. has resulted in the loss of at least 10,000 jobs. And the high sugar prices, at least 10% higher than the world price, has resulted in the substitution of high fructose corn syrup for sugar in many products. The unintended consequence is striking. Why has there been such a sharp increase in type 2 diabetes in the U.S.? Because Mansur-Olson was right about the pathology of interest group politics. Concentrated sugar interests secured protection from competition, resulting in sharply higher prices, leading people to switch to high fructose corn syrup, which has a dangerously high glycemic index. Also, about 50 families can enjoy the privilege of living at public expense because of the power of interest group politics.